The moment the waiter poured my wine, she laughed. Not at me, at him. At whatever he had just whispered to her. She touched his wrist like it belonged to her. That soft, casual, familiar kind of touch that you don't learn in a few weeks. And that's when I realized something. Not suspected, realized. She had forgotten I was watching. I wasn't supposed to be here yet. According to her, she was meeting a client for an early dinner, and I was supposed to arrive fashionably late, ring box in my jacket, violinist in tow. But I was already there. One table behind, back turned, heartbeat in my throat. And the box in my hand, the velvet one with the inscription inside, suddenly felt radioactive. I didn't need to open it. I didn't need to walk up to her table. I didn't need to see anything else. But I did. I stood up. The maitre d', recognizing me from earlier, gave me a cheerful nod and waved the violinist over. That man, poor guy, had no idea he was about to become part of the worst night of my life. I walked over to their table. She saw me. She blinked twice, then tried to rearrange her face into something resembling surprise. But it was too late. He didn't move. He just kept his hand resting under hers like this was still his evening. I pulled out the ring box, placed it between their 2 wine glasses, and said, "You forgot your anniversary, Mallory." Again, the man had the audacity to smile. Not nervously, not awkwardly, but calmly, as if I were the one interrupting something sacred. "I think," he said, sipping from her glass like it was his, "she meant to tell you tonight." And just like that, she took the ring. Not to wear it. Not to give it back. She opened the box slowly, as if studying a puzzle piece from a board game she hadn't agreed to play. And then she did something I'll never erase from memory. She slid it across the table. To him. He didn't hesitate. That's what got me. Not a flinch. Not a glance toward me. Just calmly picked up the ring box like it was a napkin he dropped and tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket. Smooth. Practiced. Like this had happened before, like other men's rings had found their way into that pocket. Mallory didn't stop him. Didn't say a word. She just folded her hands on the table, and for the first time since I walked over, she looked directly at me. Not with shame. Not even regret. Just a kind of quiet endurance. Like I was the storm she had chosen to walk through. Temporary. I see. Inconvenient. "You should sit down," she said gently. "You're shaking." I didn't sit. I didn't blink. I just stared at the empty space between them, where the ring had been, where a life was supposed to be. It felt like I had walked in on my own funeral, and the guests were already eating cake. "So," I said, barely recognizing my own voice. "This is real." He tilted his head slightly, as if I'd just asked whether the sky was blue. "She didn't want to hurt you," he said. "But she didn't want to lie anymore either." Mallory nodded. And that nod, God, that single, decisive nod, cut deeper than anything either of them could have said. Because it wasn't guilt. It was relief. Like she'd just handed off a heavy box she'd been pretending was empty for months. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table, throw the wine in his face, punch something, anything. But instead, I just sat down. My legs buckled, and I sank into the chair across from them, hands trembling like I'd run a marathon in snow. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Not loud. Not angry. Just tired. Mallory looked at me like I had asked for directions to a place she never wanted to visit. "I want to be honest," she said. For once. And then she told me everything. Not all at once. No, that would have been mercy. She spoon-fed me betrayal in gentle, measured doses, like medicine to a dying man. She told me they met at her piano student's house. That he was the kid's uncle. That he was different. That she didn't plan for it. That it just kept happening. A coffee. A walk. A weekend at a cabin she told me was a teacher's conference. She said my silence was louder than his attention. She said she waited for me to notice. That when I didn't, she made peace with the fact that I never would. And then, as if she were discussing the weather, she said she'd been planning to leave after dinner. The dinner I arranged. The dinner with the ring my grandmother gave me. I sat there listening to her rewrite the last year of our marriage into a story I didn't recognize, and all I could think about was how he still had that ring in his pocket. He didn't earn it. He didn't suffer through the years. The bills. The miscarriages. The cold nights where she couldn't sleep, and I held her until dawn. He hadn't built anything with her, just showed up, and somehow, that was enough. But then, just as I was about to stand and walk away, he did something I'll never forget. Something not even she saw coming. And that's when the evening truly spiraled into something none of us were prepared for. He reached into his jacket again, casually, like he was pulling out a credit card or gum. I remember thinking, absurdly, If he pulls out a second ring, I swear to God, but it wasn't a ring. It was a folded piece of paper, small, creased, worn around the edges. He placed it on the table in front of me, gently, like it was made of glass. For you, he said. Not to her. To me. Mallory's brow furrowed. What is that? He didn't look at her. Let him read it. My hands moved before my brain caught up. I unfolded the note slowly, expecting some smug little jab, some poetic monologue about fate or passion or other self-justifying garbage. But what I saw wasn't smug. It was precise. Like it had been drafted, edited, and rewritten multiple times before ever reaching paper. It wasn't long. Just 5 sentences. Lowell. If you're reading this, it means she didn't tell you. Not everything, anyway. I'm not your enemy. I'm just the easiest one to blame. You need to talk to her father. Ask him about September 2nd, 2018. I stared at it. My blood went cold. Mallory had gone pale. Her hands were now clenched in her lap, her gaze locked on the note like it was a weapon. What is this? I asked, not to him, to her. She shook her head, lips tight. Nothing. Just, he's trying to confuse you. But her voice cracked on the last word. That was all it took. I folded the note, placed it back on the table, and stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the floor with a sound that felt louder than the entire restaurant. Neither of them moved. She looked afraid for the first time, not guilty, not sad, afraid. September 2nd, I repeated. Why does that matter? She opened her mouth. Closed it. Tell me now, I said, or I walk out of here and never speak to you again. And I meant it. Not in a dramatic way, not as a bluff. Something in my chest had shut off. Or maybe rebooted. Like the pain was still there, but it had started to harden. I didn't want apologies anymore. I wanted the truth, whatever it cost. Mallory finally spoke, but her voice was barely a whisper. That was the day I was supposed to meet your parents. The first time. Remember? Of course I remembered. We were dating then. 9 months in. My parents had planned a lunch. They were excited. I was nervous. But she never showed. Said she had food poisoning. I believed her. I was such a fool. She looked down at her hands. I didn't have food poisoning. I was enrichment. My stomach dropped. With your father, she said. At his request. He told me there were things I needed to know. About you. About your past. My mind reeled. What the hell are you talking about? She looked up, tears brimming now. Not the performative kind. Not crocodile. These were real. But I didn't care. He said if I was serious about marrying you, I needed to know everything. And then he told me something about you. Something he swore you'd never admit. I leaned in. What did he say? She hesitated. He said you were dangerous. I laughed. It came out loud, bitter, unnatural. People at nearby tables turned. I didn't care. Dangerous? I run a help desk, Mallory. The only thing I've ever hurt is my lower back lifting that damn standing desk you begged for. I know, she said. But I believed him. Back then. He was persuasive. He showed me documents. Photos. I don't even know if they were real. But they scared me. I looked to the other man. I guess. But he didn't interrupt. He just watched. Mallory continued. That's why I distanced myself after that. It wasn't cold feet. It was fear. But then I talked myself out of it. Told myself he was just being a protective father. That he was exaggerating. But Lowell. Her voice broke again. I never told you. Because once we got married, I figured it didn't matter. But lately, when I started pulling away, it wasn't just because of him, she gestured to E. It was because your father reached out again. That stopped me cold. What? 2 months ago. He emailed me. Said he knew about the affair. That he'd tell you, unless I did exactly what he asked. I stared at her. He told me to leave you. But do it quietly. Make it clean. No drama. Just fade out. I couldn't breathe. I think he's trying to erase you, Lowell. I think he's been planning this longer than either of us knew. And suddenly, the betrayal I thought I understood fractured into something much darker. This wasn't about a love triangle anymore. This was a map, and I'd only just found the edge of it. The room was spinning, but not in the metaphorical sense. It actually felt like the walls were shifting, like the air was getting thinner. I wanted to believe she was lying, or exaggerating, or deflecting, but the look on her face said otherwise. Mallory had never been a good liar. She hesitated, blinked too fast, twisted her ring. But this version of her? This terrified, trembling, vulnerable version? She wasn't performing. I pulled my phone from my pocket with shaking fingers. My heart was pounding as I scrolled through old texts until I found the message I had sent my father 3 nights ago. I remembered the exact words. I debated them for hours. We need to talk. It's about Mallory. He hadn't responded. Now, I searched for the email app, opened it, and typed my father's name into the inbox search bar. One result. It was dated 2 months ago. From him. Subject line, a warning about your wife. I tapped it. My pulse went silent. The body of the email was brief, colder than I expected, formal almost. Like a memo sent across an office cubicle, not a letter from a father to a son. Lowell. I know this may be hard to hear, but Mallory is not who you think she is. She has been emotionally compromised by an outside party. Do not confront her. Do not accuse her. Simply prepare to separate quietly. I've arranged resources to help if needed. I know you won't understand this now, but one day you will thank me. Dad. No attachments. No proof. Just a cryptic, controlling command. And yet the worst part wasn't the content. It was the fact that he had written it weeks before I ever told him anything. Long before I found the texts. Before the missed dinner. Before the confrontation at the restaurant. It meant one thing. He already knew. Somehow, he knew before I did. And he wasn't surprised. I looked up at Mallory. Did you ever reply? She shook her head. I blocked the email. It creeped me out. But then last week, he called. From an unknown number. Told me you'd come unraveling soon. That I should stay out of the blast radius. I sank into the chair again. My hands were damp. The tablecloth felt too smooth beneath my fingers. Like everything was sterile, prepped for surgery. And then he, the man sitting across from me, the man who stole my ring and my marriage, finally spoke again. I don't think this is about the affair anymore, he said. His voice was calm, but not indifferent. Like he cared about what was happening, which somehow made it worse. Your father's been keeping tabs on her for months. But I don't think it started with her. Mallory flinched. Don't. He looked at her. He deserves to know. Not from you, she snapped. But I leaned in. From someone. He sighed and leaned back. All right. You want the truth? Here it is. I wasn't just some guy who met her at a student recital. I was sent. Hired. My stomach twisted. I work in private intelligence, he continued. Non-government. Mostly asset tracking, digital forensics, reputation management. Your father reached out to my firm 6 months ago. Said he wanted eyes on his son's wife. Claimed she was a security risk. Mallory's face turned to stone. He raised his hands. I didn't know the full story. They never give us that. We follow, we report, we stay quiet. But the more I watched, the more the story didn't add up. She wasn't laundering money. She wasn't spying. She was just unhappy. And your dad? He wasn't trying to protect you. He was trying to isolate you. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. He looked down for a moment, then said, almost reluctantly, that's when I broke protocol. I introduced myself to her. Not as a PI. As someone at the recital. It wasn't supposed to go anywhere. But he looked over at Mallory, who wouldn't meet his eyes. I fell for her. The sentence hung in the air like smoke. And when she told me what your father had said about 2018, about your past, I started digging into him. That's when things got strange. He leaned forward. Lowell, do you remember ever being hospitalized when you were 17? The question hit me like a slap. No, I said too quickly. Think carefully. I wasn't. I paused. Images began to stir. Blurry. Faded. A hospital hallway. A red wristband. Screaming through a door I couldn't open. Mallory's voice returned. Small. He said there was an incident. Something you repressed. I couldn't move. Couldn't blink. He reached into his pocket again, slowly. Not the same pocket that held the ring. From the other side, he pulled out a USB stick. Laid it gently on the table beside my wine glass. Everything's on here, he said. Medical records. Police reports. Surveillance from the facility your father had sealed. It's your past. The one he erased. Mallory whispered. We were never the secret. You were, I said aloud, staring at the USB like it contained a ghost. She looked up. What? My father never wanted to expose you, I said, voice numb. He wanted to control me. Because I'm the one with the secret. Not you. Not this affair. This was never about love. It was about leverage. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. My whole life had been shaped by a memory I wasn't allowed to keep. I didn't plug in the USB at the restaurant. I couldn't. My hands were numb, and I didn't trust myself to hold a wine glass, let alone a laptop. I left without saying another word. No dramatic speech. No final look. Just the scraping of my chair against polished tile and the slow, mechanical walk to my car like I was moving underwater. I heard Mallory call my name once, soft, uncertain, but I didn't turn around. I didn't trust her voice anymore. I didn't trust anything. That night, I sat in my home office for hours, the USB untouched on my desk. It sat there like a loaded weapon. I poured myself a glass of scotch, took one sip, then dumped the rest down the sink. I needed to be clear. I needed to be awake. Around 2:17 a.m., I finally opened my laptop and slid the USB into the port. The folder that opened had a strange name, R2_17. Inside were PDFs, scans of medical forms, incident reports, and, at the bottom, one short video file labeled only, clip_0902, 2008 inch. I didn't start there. I started with the reports. Cold clinical notes, most of them redacted. My name came up multiple times. Apparently, I had been admitted to a private facility outside of Hartford, Connecticut, 17 years ago, not for injury, but for observation. No mention of psychosis. No violence. The stated reason? Acute dissociative break, cause unclear. Possible induced memory suppression recommended. Patient is unresponsive to timeline anchoring. I kept reading. Nurses wrote that I didn't remember arriving. That I responded to my own name but couldn't recall the week before. That my father visited twice, each time requesting to speak to staff off the record. There were no signatures from my mother. No calls logged from her. Her name wasn't listed at all. But I remembered her being there. I remembered it. Her singing to me. Her holding my hand. Unless. I didn't. Unless he put that memory there. When I couldn't take any more of the reports, I opened the video. It was only 11 seconds. The grainy footage looked like it came from a wall-mounted camera, angled down, a wide view of a small white room with a metal frame bed in the center. On the mattress sat a teenage boy, no older than 16. He was curled in the corner, knees pulled to chest, rocking slightly. Me. Even through the fuzzy resolution, I knew it. The way I bit my lower lip, the nervous bounce of my right leg, it was me. A man entered the room. Tall. Formal. Wearing a tie and black gloves. My father. He didn't speak. He sat down beside me and reached into his jacket. He pulled out something I couldn't see, something small, and held it to my temple. I didn't flinch. Didn't react. My eyes just shut slowly. The footage cut off. That was it. No audio. No explanation. No timestamp. Just that quiet, eerie moment. My father with something pressed to my head. And me, going still, like a switch had been flipped. I played it again. And again. And by the 5th time, I noticed something I hadn't caught the first few times. In the corner of the room, above the door, was a small plaque. Barely visible, but enough for me to zoom in and make out the words. Facility R2, long-term cognitive modulation. My stomach turned. That wasn't a hospital. It was a memory suppression site. Whatever happened that week, whatever I saw, whatever I did, whatever he was so desperate to make me forget, it wasn't just trauma. It was inconvenient to him. Something he couldn't risk me remembering. I shut the laptop and sat back in the chair. My reflection in the dark window didn't look like me. My face was slack, pale, my eyes sunken. Like something had drained out of me while I watched that 11 seconds. I had been chasing the wrong betrayal this entire time. Mallory's affair wasn't the original crack. It was just the leak that finally exposed the entire sinking ship. And then my phone buzzed. No caller ID. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. There was silence at first. Then a man's voice. Calm. Deliberate. One I hadn't heard in years. You shouldn't have opened it, son. My throat went dry. You remember what happens when you go looking. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. You need to stop now, he said. Before someone else gets hurt. He hung up. And I realized, with a clarity that sent a chill through every nerve in my body, that this wasn't just a family secret. It was a cover-up. And someone had just noticed I cracked it open. I barely slept. Every creak in the house became a gunshot. Every flicker of light from a passing car felt like a shadow moving across the walls. By morning, my hands were still trembling, and my skin felt too tight, like my body didn't want me in it anymore. I called in sick to work, not that I could have stared at a help desk monitor with any level of functionality. All I could do was sit there at the edge of my bed with the USB still burning a hole in my laptop, and the phone call repeating in my mind like a haunting voicemail that hadn't stopped echoing. You remember what happens when you go looking. The voice wasn't angry. It was almost fatherly, which somehow made it worse. Like he was still trying to act like he was doing me a favor, like the act of erasing part of my brain was some parental sacrifice. I couldn't take that tone anymore. I needed facts. I needed records. So I drove, 3 hours out of town, to the only place I knew might still hold unfiltered pieces of me, my childhood town's family care center. It was a faded beige building off a back road with a crooked sign out front that still said, "Welcome patients," like it was trying to be cheerful. It smelled like old paper and Lysol. The receptionist looked at me like I'd arrived from a time machine. She remembered me, called me by name before I even said it. "You're Lowell," she said. "Your dad used to bring you here sometimes, right?" "Yeah," I said carefully. "Do you still have any of the old records?" She frowned. "From when?" I lied. "Late 2007 through 2008. I'm doing some research. Family medical history stuff." She hesitated, then shrugged. "We keep most of it archived. Depends on the doctor." The name I remembered was Dr. Fenley. He wasn't my regular doctor, more of a behavioral specialist I supposedly saw briefly, or so I was told. I gave her the name. She typed for a moment, then looked surprised. "Huh," she muttered. "What?" "Well, his file on you is huge. Weird thing is, the intake form says initial consult only, but he added notes for over 5 years. I felt my skin prickle. "Can I see them?" She hesitated. "You'd need a release form, but he's dead. So technically, yeah, you can request a copy. I'll print it now." It took 11 minutes. When she returned, she handed me a thick stack of yellowed paper with a rubber band around it. On the front page, patient, Lowell Reese/record start date, September 3rd, 2007. And on the second page, something that made my heart seize. Patient displays a fragmented recollection of house layout inconsistent with known residents. Believes mother is alive. Declares birthdays that do not correspond to existing records. Claims to hear himself talking from the other side of the room. Symptoms align with synthetic implantation attempts, but without official documentation, cannot confirm. Suspicion, external manipulation. Monitoring advised. My mother. The birthday. The voice. It was all there. Things I didn't know I knew. Page after page described a boy slowly unraveling reality, but doing it quietly. High functioning, one line said. Compliant but confused. Doesn't push boundaries. Doesn't question details for long. Another line read. There is a sense that Lowell wants to forget. When left alone, he dissociates in a way that appears rehearsed. This could be self-protection or learned response. Father is non-communicative during follow-ups. Requests minimal intervention and appears to have external influence beyond clinic authority. I felt sick. The therapist had known. He knew something was being done to me, possibly engineered, and certainly deliberate, and he documented it all in quietly worded notes that no one ever followed up on. I flipped to the last page. It wasn't dated. No signature. Just one final line written in capital letters across the bottom. If he ever asks questions, do not let him remember everything at once. I sat in my car in the parking lot for an hour just staring at that sentence. Something inside me was already unlocking. I could feel it. The way certain smells triggered flashes of rooms I couldn't place. The way the word marigold suddenly echoed in my head without context. There was a dam in my brain, and the cracks were growing. My father had built it, sealed it, maybe even paid to keep it standing, but it wasn't going to hold forever. When I got back home, the front door was open. Not wide, just ajar. I hadn't left it that way. The air inside was still, unnaturally still, like someone had been there and left just moments before. And on my kitchen table was a manila envelope with no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid photo warped from age, yellowing at the corners. It was of me, age 9, standing in front of a house I've never seen in my life, holding hands with someone who looked almost like my mother, except she had no face. It had been scribbled out in thick black ink, aggressively, violently, as if someone couldn't bear for me to know who she really was. And on the back, in small, block handwriting, were just 3 words. You still forgot. I must have stared at that photo for 20 minutes without blinking. My childhood self, 9 years old, freckle-faced, standing stiffly in front of a house that felt both alien and faintly familiar. But it wasn't just the strange architecture or the odd gray sky that unsettled me. It was the woman beside me. The way her arm draped protectively over my shoulder, the soft curve of her jawline. It all whispered familiarity. Even with her face blacked out, no, Because her face was blacked out, I felt the quiet scream of recognition bubbling up somewhere beneath the skin of my memory. And then came the worst part. I heard her. Not a metaphor. Not a daydream. I heard her voice, crisp and gentle, somewhere in the folds of my skull, like a recording that had been paused for 2 decades and was suddenly unmuted. Don't say Marigold. Not in front of him. I dropped the photo. The voice was wrong. Not frightening in tone, but terrifying in implication. I had never remembered any woman speaking that sentence to me, and yet it felt so vividly real I could tell you the color of her sweater, the way her fingernail tapped the glass when she said it. Burgundy wool. 3 slow taps. Like a countdown. I paced the kitchen, heart jackhammering, breath shallow, mind unraveling at every turn. The sentence haunted me like a dream just beyond reach. Who was him? Why was Marigold forbidden? And more importantly, why did my father pretend none of this existed? I needed answers, but the kind I couldn't Google. So I did something desperate. I called Mallory. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was groggy, or maybe guarded. Lowell. I got a photo, I said. Someone was in my house. They left it here. The woman in it, she's with me. 9 years old. But her face is blacked out. Silence. Then, where was the photo taken? I don't know. Some house I don't recognize. But it doesn't look photoshopped. It looks real. More silence. And then her voice dropped into something I didn't expect, something close to panic. Don't look into it alone. What? I mean it, Lowell. If someone's breaking into your house and leaving pieces of your past, it means they're not trying to hide anything anymore. They're trying to test you. Test me how? She hesitated. To see how far they can push before you remember something they can't contain. I froze. What do you mean contain? You don't understand, she said. You were always the key. Not me. Not your dad. Not the affair. You. You saw something when you were young. I don't know what. But I think someone or something buried it deep inside you. And now it's waking up. I swallowed hard. You sound like you've known this longer than you admitted. There was a pause. Then, you're right. The silence between us was thick. I didn't know what it was, she said. But I knew your dad was terrified of you remembering. I think that's why he wanted me gone. Not because I was disloyal, but because I was a variable he couldn't control anymore. I wanted to scream, to throw something. But instead, I looked back down at the photo on the table and noticed something I'd missed before. In the background, over my childhood shoulder, through the window of the strange house, there was a mirror. And in the mirror's reflection, barely visible, grainy and distorted, was another figure standing in the hallway. It wasn't my father. It wasn't the woman. It was me. Older. Watching from the hallway. Wearing the same shirt I had on now. I dropped the phone. No, 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 no. This couldn't be possible. Not just a childhood photo. Not just a manipulated image. This was something else entirely, a fracture in reality. A piece of time folded in on itself, evidence that whatever had been buried in me wasn't just a memory. It was an event. Something I had witnessed, or done, that was never supposed to exist in a linear timeline. My presence in that photo wasn't symbolic. It wasn't artistic. It was literal. And whoever left that envelope knew I'd find it. The knock on the door almost made my heart stop. 3 sharp raps. Then nothing. I crept to the peephole. No one there. But when I opened the door, another envelope lay on the porch. Inside this one was a burned scrap of paper. Smelled like gasoline and ash. Just 2 words, scribbled in jagged marker. She's waiting. I turned around slowly, and for just a flash, in the hallway mirror, I thought I saw the same burgundy sweater pass behind me. When I spun to face it, no one was there. But the marigold vase near the window had shattered across the floor, and I had no memory of ever owning it. The marigold petals scattered across the floor like clues from a forgotten dream, curling at the edges, soft and lifeless. I stood in the hallway, heart pounding, trying to decide if I was losing my mind or finally finding it. The air felt thicker, charged with something ancient and unfinished. I walked to the broken vase slowly, careful not to step on the shards. When I reached down to pick one up, I noticed a small chip of glass glinting with something underneath, something embedded in the floorboards. I pried it loose. It was a key. Tiny, brass, the kind you'd find in a locked journal or a hidden drawer in an old desk. It was warm in my hand, like it had been waiting there. Waiting for me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I didn't want to. I sat in my office with the photo in one hand and the key in the other, the USB files open on the screen behind me. I replayed that 11-second clip again, slower this time. Frame by frame. My father pressing something to my temple. My eyelids dropping, my body going still. Then something shifted. On the final frame, just before the screen cut to black, I caught a reflection in the mirror behind him. A face. Her. The woman from the photo. The one whose face had been scribbled out. But here, just a glimpse, full and real. She wasn't my mother, but she had the same eyes. And then I remembered. All of it. Not in pieces. Not in fragments. It came rushing back like a dam had finally burst. The summer I turned 9, I spent 2 months in a research compound disguised as a home for children with unique perception anomalies. My father called it camp. Told everyone I was going to learn piano. But it wasn't music we were being taught. It was forgetting. They ran simulations, designed dreamlike environments, showed us people pretending to be our family. They experimented with memory anchoring, planting details, removing others. We were watched through mirrors, spoken to in our sleep. That woman, the one who held my hand in the photo, she wasn't my mom. She was my guide, a volunteer. Her name was Saran. She was the only one who told me the truth. Whispered it to me at night when the others weren't around. Told me what they were doing, what I'd have to forget, and most importantly, how I could find my way back if I ever needed to. Marigold, she said. That's her tether. When you see it, remember? She gave me a key before they took her away. A real one, like the one I found beneath the vase. She said I'd know where it went when the time was right. It was right now. I opened the bottom drawer of my old desk. Behind a false panel I'd never noticed, not until my hands started moving on instinct, was a lock. The key fit. Inside was a single cassette tape, labeled in handwriting that I now recognized as my own. Do not listen unless you know. I dusted off the old tape player, pressed it in, and hit play. The voice that came through wasn't a child's. It was mine, but younger, calm, steady. If you're hearing this, it means it worked. You made it back. They couldn't erase you completely. They tried, but something held, maybe her, maybe you. You don't need to run anymore. You don't need to hide. You survived it. Now go live. I let it play out in full. No static. No interruptions. Just me, telling me I was okay. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, I believed it. The next morning, I called Mallory. We didn't talk long. Just enough for me to say what needed to be said. I don't hate you, I told her. You didn't break me. You just cracked the surface. And underneath all of this, I was already lost. She cried. Said she was sorry. I told her not to be. What we were was never meant to last, but it led me to the truth. And for that, I thanked her. I moved out 2 weeks later. New apartment. New job. Smaller place. Simpler life. I started seeing a therapist, a real one, and told her everything. She believed me. Said healing doesn't always come from answers. Sometimes, it comes from permission. Permission to remember. Permission to feel. Permission to finally move forward without dragging a vault of silence behind you. Now, some mornings I wake up to the smell of marigolds. Not the flower. The memory. And instead of fear, I feel centered. I keep the photo on my shelf, no longer afraid of the scribbled-out face. I know who she is. I know who I am. And that's enough. So yeah, I gave a ring to the wrong woman. I chased ghosts in candlelit restaurants. I cracked open a past that someone powerful wanted me to forget. But in doing so, I found something they never wanted me to have. Peace. Not because it was handed to me. Because I earned it. Don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content.